Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wharton Club of Delhi's webinar, Retooling for Post-COVID World. We have folks joining in from across the world and alumni, that includes alumni from leading schools from the US, Europe, and India. So very good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you may be. Thanks for taking out the time. My name is Abhay Bhargav. I'm a Wharton alum and part of the executive committee of the Wharton Club of Delhi. I'm really excited about today's webinar on COVID's impact on business and how we can start thinking about our own industries and businesses to better adapt and deal with these unprecedented times and successfully retool to come out a winner. We have three industry stalwarts who are also Wharton alumni joining us as panelists for this webinar. Mr. Tarun, Mr. Arvind, Balaji, and Mr. Amit Sinha. I will start with a brief introduction on all three of them, and starting with Mr. Tarun Sawhney, who's on the extreme right on your screen. Mr. Tarun Sawhney is the Vice Chairman and Managing Director of Triveni Engineering and Industries Limited. Triveni is amongst the largest fully integrated sugar and alcohol manufacturers in India and a market leader in its engineering businesses. That includes gearboxes, naval defense solutions, and water treatment solutions. Mr. Sawhney is the past president of the Indian Sugar Mills Association and has been conferred the Industry Excellence Award for contributions to the sugar industry by the Honorable President of India, Srimati Pratibha Rao Patil. Mr. Sawhney graduated with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from Emmanuel College at the University of Cambridge in the UK and has an MBA from the Wharton School. Coming to Mr. Arvind Balaji, he's the Joint Managing Director of Lucas-TVS Limited and Managing Director of India Nippon Electricals Limited. He's also a Director of Lucas Indian Service Limited, Delphi TVS Technologies Limited, TVS Training and Services Limited, and Schaeffler India Limited. Prior to joining Lucas-TVS, he worked in the investment banking division of Bank of America. Mr. Balaji has an MBA in finance from Wharton School, as well as a master's degree in manufacturing systems engineering from Stanford University, and a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Birla Institute of Technology at Pilani. Mr. Amit Sinha is a senior partner with Bain and Company in their Delhi office. He has 18 years of management consulting experience in advising private, public, and MNC firms, as well as the Indian government. His expertise spans a range of industries, including IT services, private equity, and consumer products, and he focuses on the energy, power, and airline sector. Mr. Sinha holds a dual MBA in finance and strategy from Wharton School and has a bachelor's in engineering from the Birla Institute of Technology. And of course, Mr. Amit Sinha wanted to, before I hand it over to Mr. Sinha, wanted to acknowledge his role in leading this webinar, bringing in his classmates, MBA classmates, Mr. Balaji and Mr. Sawhney, to this webinar and kind of pretty much leading the structure of it and the organization. And of course, personally, I would want to recognize Amit's role in the founding of the Wharton Club of Delhi, where he was also one of the founding executive committee members. And quickly before I hand it over to Amit, a quick housekeeping point. We'll have the Q&A session with the panelists at the end. So, but while we're discussing, you're welcome to post your questions. The panelists will be able to see those questions, and of course, I'll be on a lookout for those, and both Amit and I will collate and curate those and get to those questions at the end in the Q&A session. So again, welcome, and I'll hand it over to Amit now. Over to you, Amit.
Great. Thank you, Abhay. Very helpful. One thing to add to what Abhay said, I think it came across, but all of us are classmates from Wharton class of 2002. So it's an honor and privilege to share this platform with Arvind and Tarun. And we'll share some of our experience as we take it forward. So I have a very short presentation to set the context, and then we'll I have a set of questions to moderate our discussion going forward. Let me jump into the quick presentation very quickly. Um, these are unprecedented times, as Abhay you mentioned. The world is so very different from what it was before February, March of this year. Many of our clients in the consulting CEOs are asking us, hey, what does it mean for us from learning from previous downturns? What does it take to be successful, a winner from this current and maybe other future downturns? And how do they individually retool themselves? How should they think about their skill set? So these are the two questions that have come up with many of our CEOs across the industries. And we call it retooling. But as we take this forward, the retooling could be very different from individual as well as individual industries. And that's the part that we love to discuss with you and share some of our learning. Big changes are coming. The post-pandemic world will be very different. I think you probably saw the news today. US GDP in Q2, calendar year Q2, contracted by as much as 33%. Not growth, they contracted. In summary, it wiped out the growth that US economy has had for the last 5 years. That's the impact that we have already had on the GDP of US, and globally it's going to have even major impact depending on the time of vaccine. Tarun and Arvind were just talking about when the likely vaccine is, what's the timeline for vaccine to come out. But what it has done is it has changed the mindset significantly. As an example, there are 6 trends that we have seen. You see it on this page. The end of globalization, as an example, started with Trump and China trade war. It already started to create a feeling of nationalism versus the globalization that we have seen across the economy for the last 30, 40 years. Similarly, contactless buying. Who would have thought that industry, especially in the manufacturing, the industrial place, will be forced to think about contactless buying? There are many such trends that are going to shape the way we are going to be working forward. However, the key question is, if the pandemic continues for some more time, and this is not going to be the last pandemic, how should we think about coming out of this stronger? So, just like True Consultant, we looked at the historic recession, especially the GFC 2008, 2009. Just to give you a reference point, compared to where we stand today, 2008 and 2009 recession seems a mild one. The world GDP in 2009 only contracted 0.1%. So 2009 GDP, world GDP was only 0.1% lower. It took almost 12 months for the world GDP to recover to growth pattern. We have already seen a shrinkage, contraction of world GDP by 5%. It was expected to go up by 3, but it's going to shrink by 5%. The US GDP news that I shared is just an example of how widespread the impact is. However, you see this chart which highlights that this is done based on the performance of 4,000 companies across geographies, across markets. There are 1 in 8 companies that follow the trajectory that you see in the green, and 7 out of 8 companies have actually ended up following the red trajectory. Winners in green have followed a set of moves, and it's driven by the actions they take during the recession. So the key learning from this chart is waiting and watching for the pandemic to pass is should not be part of your agenda. Instead, you should be thinking about what actions you should be taking now that will allow you to emerge as a winner going forward. If you take this a little bit forward, the framing that we've used quite a lot with our CEOs, clients is act now and plan now. Act now. If I were to give marks to many of my CEO in terms of the action they have taken on act now, I would give them 80, 90 out of 100. They really understood the pandemic. They really doubled down on a lot of things they should do differently on employee health, preserving cash and making sure that all the moves on the customer side are, as systematic as possible. But the second part, the flip side of this equation is plan now. What should you be planning now so that you come out as a winner, as you saw on the previous page? And I would give 40 out of 50 to many of the leadership team CXO that I've seen, because people are not aware what action they ought to be taking that will allow them to be coming out successfully. And that's the discussion we should have. What kind of changes you can bring in your operating model in terms of retooling yourself that allows you to plan to be ready for this new business condition, new context. I will not spend much time on ACT now. This is very well publicized, very well understood. A lot of details I can share to the group as well. But as an example, I am a big fan of number 10, playing offense and preparing for, while you, prepare for that bounce back. I think most of the companies become very inward focused, but we recommend to our clients, our CEO, colleagues that, you need to think about what offense can do to your business. Extremely, extremely valuable going forward. So that's some of the elements of ACT now. You've seen the liquidity and the number one, negotiation with lenders, protecting employees and customers, and so on and so forth. So that's the ACT now. I think the key thing is, how do you plan now? How are you able to predict, adopt, and make yourself resilient given the nature of this change that has come our way? As an example, when we predicted business plans for many of our clients, it was used to be forecast depending on multiple growth scenario, but it's going to be now very much signpost driven, event driven. So how do you actually factor those in your planning, and you're able to shape your cost structure, your organization model to support that? That's adaptability, and then plan for resiliency in terms of any kind of risk that will come in the supply chain in terms of operational continuity. And the last slide that I have is on the new operating model, and we'll have a good amount of discussion on this. This is a very busy slide, but it highlights the 15-20 trend that we are seeing across various clients, various industries. Many things on the manufacturing. How do you actually take advantage of China plus 110 trend? We are saying, how do you make your manufacturing more low cost and flexible, and use technology to make it as efficient as possible? Supply chain, how do you think about resilience and redesign your supply chain away from market which are supply and market that will that affects your supply, your final production numbers? Customer value proposition, people operating model, and is becoming a key part. For example, the second one on that page, gig economy and flexible talent pools. There is suddenly people are working from home and looking at, hey, we got let's say a talent pool that was untapped, like women, a potential women workforce that were not working, very talented, and they only had 4 hours in a day. How do you actually leverage that talent pool to support your needs? And that's very efficient from a cost structure point of view, but also very high caliber in terms of talent pool that was not available. Similarly, number 6 is all about data. The importance of data to make decisions is becoming even more important as you look at your internal organization as well as external organization. So these 6 elements are shaping the new operating model. And I'd love to have a little bit of a discussion on this along with my co-panelists as we take it forward. So those were the very quick thoughts from my side, just to set the context where we are in the pandemic, the impact on the business conditions, and what we are seeing across markets. Let me stop the presentation and then go into the panel discussion with Arvind and Tarun. So welcome back, Arvind and Tarun. Sorry for the monologue, but at least wanted to use that to set the context. But let me start with the first question, and Tarun, I'll request you to kick off, and then Arvind for you to chime in. Tarun, what do you think will be the impact on India's business environment driven by COVID? Lots of question about, is it going to be V, or is it W, is it U, is it Nike shoe, like swoosh symbol? Like, what do you think will be the impact on India's business environment post-COVID?
Thanks, Amit. And first, let me start off by saying that it's a pleasure being here today and talking on this panel. But in response to your question, I think the COVID crisis has created a sense of opportunity, but that opportunity is like a pot of gold. There's a tremendous amount of pain, but the opportunity is and can be real and palpable. I have to say that it's important to understand what's really happened before one looks at, at the impact of reshaping the Indian business environment in the wake of the COVID crisis. And one of the most important factors to consider is the mass migration that has happened. And there is a truth that I certainly believe, that the dream of the urban opportunity, the Indian urban opportunity, has been permanently dented, with so many people having been forced to go home to their villages and to remote areas, and incur tremendous amounts of pain in that process as well. So the opportunity that I believe that will exist, one of the elements is something that I like to call a urban opportunity, the rural-urban opportunity. It's about it's about bringing rural supply chains and value chains to the forefront and investment in those. Now, there's a lot that needs to happen for that to become a reality. I think skilling will play the most important role in the ability to take the skills that are prevalent for people that are in rural India and really bring that about as a driving force for the Indian economy. Now, it's being supported. Schemes, our Prime Minister's vision of an Atmanirbhar Bharat is absolutely vital in order to achieve this type of post-COVID growth and reshaping of the Indian business environment. And for me personally, an Atmanirbhar Bharat is not about Nehruvian import substitution. It is far more about an approach to a decentralized system where rural India plays an important role, and opportunity truly abounds. So and what it will take is intangible. There is an element of trust that has been lost, okay? And that element of trust, not just societal, but economic trust, needs to be rebuilt. And one of the key fundamentals in that is a revised look at the enforcement of contracts in India. So for us to really come out of this, we need to look within and find the opportunities, find the silver linings that exist. But there are many, and I'm happy to talk about that in detail later.
Arvind, do you want to share your views?
Yeah, good afternoon. Nice to be here with everyone. I guess my view is not so much of whether it's good or bad. It's here, and it's more disruptive than any of us ever thought it would ever be. I think rarely in history we have a time where everything gets reset. Tarun talked about people going back to villages. We talked about import substitution, Atmanirbhar Bharat. I work in the auto industry, and we've been subject to globalization for a long time now, and disruption has been the name of the game with electric vehicles and shared mobility. So we have had to deal with these changes for quite some time. But I can tell you this change, I see it as a reinvention point for India. I think through these last 20 years of globalization, there have been a lot of positives. There have also been a lot of mistakes we've made. And I think this has given, at least the way I see it, I look at it as a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to correct some of those mistakes and grab the opportunity. We've lost some position to the global marketplace to some of the countries like China or Southeast Asia. We actually have a chance to right it now. And when people are looking for options, to make India a point to actually make for the world. So I think this is a great opportunity to reinvent ourselves in the right way, whatever that may be. There will be some changes. There'll be changes in consumer behavior. There'll be changes in priorities. But overall, somehow I feel this will be a chance for India to really make the right place for herself. It's what I sense it. And that's how we're approaching it.
Great. Thank you, Arvind. Thank you, Tarun. I think beyond India, I think we love to get your perspective, by industries. Arvind, you started to touch upon the auto, and Tarun, you are at the cusp of rural as well as, industrial machinery in capital goods sector. Maybe Arvind, why don't you take on some of the challenges and the opportunities, on the auto sector that is getting created on the COVID? You touched upon it already. Love for you to elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, the auto industry is one of the most globalized supply chains in the world. A very high quality, high engineering supply chain creates tremendous amounts of jobs. And I think the auto industry is 50% of India's manufacturing GDP or some ridiculous number like that. And so it's really, in many ways, it's a defining factor of the health of the manufacturing economy of the country. And I've headed the association. I know how good the Indian manufacturers are. But in my opinion, we were a bit too late to take on the opportunity for the world. And so by the time you're ready to actually make for the world, any number of players in China already got full capacity. China went one step further and actually invested on electric vehicle components well before anybody else did. And so they also now own the supply chain for that. So today we have a situation where diesel is a no-no. Electric vehicles are coming in. We have inside our country dynamics that are changing in the industry. So what is our position now? Can we take advantage of this opportunity, or are we back playing second fiddle to China? So we were struggling with that for 4 or 5 years already. And I think most companies already had taken steps to diversify their revenue base and expand and things like that. COVID has given us this opportunity that we never would have had otherwise. Government is now obviously very keen that the electrical vehicle revolution doesn't depend 100% on China, which would have happened before. So they're forcing the localization of many components, which are anyway mandatory now, which gives Indian companies an opportunity to establish their footprint. And we are seeing that happen as it goes along. So I think in our industry, again, this reset has given us a chance where we earlier were kind of on the back foot. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. No, very interesting. Very useful. Tarun, you want to give, you set a very interesting mix of industry, rural on one side and industrial capex, heavy industry on the other side, right? Your comments?
Sure. So let me start off with our agricultural portfolio. Through the COVID crisis, whether it be the manufacture of sugar, the generation of power, or the manufacture of alcohol and ethanol, these were industries that were considered essential. And therefore, they continued right through the start of the lockdown, and they of course continue at peak capacities even today. And it's very interesting. The COVID crisis did one of two things. The ability to be able to operate through a national lockdown is a great learning experience. Okay, it really needs to be viewed as a once in a lifetime opportunity. I'm happy to say that it was with a lot of effort, a few sleepless nights. In 72 hours, we were able to go contactless. So we touch approximately 150,000 different people every day. And with such large numbers, and all in the state of Uttar Pradesh, we were able to ensure that there was completely contactless operations in a safe and secure manner. Of course, systems get improved. There's a lot of continuous learning that happens over here, but through that comes a huge bevy of opportunity. And so, for example, the sanitizer business, we had a huge amount of requests by the central and state governments to actually approach this industry. It was considered a national necessity, declared an essential commodity. So you embrace that opportunity state up front. But out of that and out of the Atmanirbhar schemes comes a massive urge for self-reliance. And this self-reliance, whether it be, let me talk about energy security, be that in ethanol, alcohol, biogas, etc. These are going to be driving forces for the industry. They're going to promote investment of capital by entrepreneurs. They're going to promote investment of capital by multinational corporations within the Indian ecosystem, driving forth new opportunity. And our ability to be able to embrace this, not just from an investment platform, but also from a regulatory framework, is something that I'm very confident about. I see that there's been a tremendous opportunity and a tremendous openness with government to and this alludes to one of the slides that you put up, Amit, to actually talk about what the problems are and what types of changes in frameworks would be required to promote a better investment climate. And I think that kind of environment has not existed in some time, or such a positive environment has not existed. And I'm seeing that in my industries. Of course, there may be others who would beg to differ. On the engineering front, of course, there's been a reasonable amount of pain because the lockdown meant you actually had to shut down.
Yeah.
And these businesses, very similar to Arvind's, face global pressures. You have global supply chains on your raw material side, and of course your customer base is widespread across the globe. And there will be changes. There will have to be changes right from the way that you source, the way that you operate, the way that you conduct business, the way that you conform to marketing. And these are things that are commonplace across industrial sectors. But for Indian manufacturing, The opportunity is real. It is really a chance to sort of shed the tag of low-cost manufacturing and embrace an opportunity that allows you to participate in global supply chains in a renewed manner. Something that we really haven't been able to do in spades, for the last 20, 25 or 30 years. Mm-hmm. So there's tremendous opportunity from my perspective.
Got it. Let me peel this onion a little bit more, and I think I'm seeing some questions also come up from the panel, from the audience. I think, Arvind, you touched upon a very interesting point about global supply chain. And as we work across industries, there are only two kinds of strategies. 65% of the time, cost leadership. 35% of the time, differentiation. And many of the industries that we are talking here, I think cost leadership has to be a key part of share gain, in domestic as well as global marketplace. Do you think, Arvind, question to you to start with, are we competitive or will we be competitive in auto? Let's say you take the ICE or EV, whichever one, and how do we get there? And some of the questions raised by the panel or the audience is, given our infrastructure issues, given our ecosystem, given our level of automation, and many other things that we could bring in, I know it's a loaded question, but love to get your views.
If I had to be brutally honest about this question, I don't think any of those factors come in the way of us growing. And I also don't fully agree, Amit, respectfully, with your point about 65% cost leadership and 35% innovation. I think, and we've had to compete with Chinese players. We have sourced material from China. I've really tried to understand China. We've bought a lot of equipment over the years. And I think we underestimate what China provided for the world. It's not just cheap goods. Actually, they're not that cheap. Any study upon study has shown that India can be as competitive, but the world is not just looking for a cheap source. The world is looking for a competitive source, which means product quality, speed of response, and price. Actually, India, I think, suffers more from speed of response and indecision rather than on price. I've seen technologically, we can compete with the best of them. But just the speed at which we move, the ferocity with which we respond, that's where we can do a lot better. Mm-hmm. So I think competitiveness India has, and I think it has nothing to do with the government. It has to do with us as promoters and entrepreneurs and CEOs, what we do to actually push Indian companies forward. And I think that has more to do with grabbing the opportunity now that's there in front of us and making something of it. We have enough Indian companies that have started making those moves, and they've demonstrated those skills. So I don't see the government playing such a big role. Of course, they can help. Of course, they can do. Our cost of capital is high. If we have to buy companies to scale up, actually, we're at a disadvantage. I can list a lot of things the Indian government can do. But is that the main reason why we've not done? I don't think so. I think it's really us taking the next big step. But I've also studied some Chinese companies to understand their story. How do they make that jump? Almost all of them became local leaders in a market that gained some scale and then went out to the world. And I think India also hasn't had scale or depth in any of its industries. It's only now we're just starting to have some scale in some industries. Now that we have that scale, I think now the game will be played. And I think this is the right time to start playing the game.
No, great point.
If you see in 2004, we were so small. Even large companies in India were so small. And they didn't have the competence or the depth in the company to actually take on the world.
Correct.
But I think that story is different now.
Absolutely. Tarun, on the industrial part of your portfolio, do you want to comment on the competitiveness?
Sure. It goes back to your, you put up a slide about act now and
plan now. Yeah.
I'll give you my perspective on this. And I'm in complete agreement with what Arvind has just said. There's been a lot of talk recently about how do we create Indian MNCs. Okay. The journey has been long. In domestic market dominance is something that we have all been accustomed to because this stems from our economic beliefs post-independence. The roots are founded there. But going forward, and as we embrace the world, we've got to find ways of being competitive. You're absolutely right. And in order to be able to do that, and this is not just for the largest companies, this is from the smallest, medium-sized, and larger companies. I believe that we have to have a two-pronged strategy. We have to be inward-looking. Okay, the COVID crisis across the board, whether you are performing well or whether you're suffering, has necessitated a requirement to look inwards. Okay, you have to protect cash. Cash is king in today's world of business. And liquidity is absolutely vital as a growth engine going forward. It's never been more important as it is now. And when you look at that, and when you look inwards and reflect on your businesses, how can you change processes? You know, travel, for example, is a huge cost that has automatically been taken out, and businesses will learn to reshape their own policies to make themselves more agile. And that will come out of some sense of necessity. But and the other part, of course, is on reflection. The second aspect is really to be outward looking. There are plenty of opportunities that this crisis will throw up. You gave an example of companies that embraced change after the Lehman crisis, okay, after the financial crisis of 2007, and the trajectory that they were on, 14% CAGR, etc. You can track that back to every single crisis over the last 30 years. If you go back to the dot-com crisis and did some research on that, you may find that companies, and there are many companies that emanated out of that crisis, whose growth trajectories are far greater. And that is that outward-looking perspective. You've got to see what are the areas of demand that have been created coming out of this particular crisis. The one silver lining that I will say is that there's a tremendous amount of capital. If you look at equity markets around the world, they're at historic highs. And there are many companies, many organizations that are looking at raising capital now because it is there, it is available, and there's plenty of it. The question really is to put together compelling arguments for people to actually invest in you. So, you know, I'm talking very generically, but I think it is through that type of conversation that you can really figure out what are the ideas, what is specific to your industry, and specific to my industry on the engineering front is really a drive to find associated areas of growth, okay? Because there has been a gap in terms of expenditure on R&D. So that is a critical area to embrace, to actually own technology and utilize that technology to meet demands and forecasting those demands out 5 or 10 years' time. And I think India will play a crucial role in that ecosystem of research and development going forward. So, you know, that's my piece in this.
No, great thoughts. Very helpful, very thoughtful. I think you both touched upon act now, plan now in some shape and form. Act now, plan now, the framing that I started the discussion. I found that framing quite useful. As you look at your industries, your own company, what are your priorities so that you come out as a winner? So how are you thinking about, let me start with Tarun again from you and then come to Arvind. In your industry, what are your priorities to come out a winner? What is act now for you? What is plan now for you?
So I have a very quick answer to this question. It's really on the engineering front about utilization of time. You know, we've been working from home. There has been a little bit of return to the office that's happened across our engineering portfolio, but it's about really meeting our customers' demands. In certain businesses, we have domestic customers, municipalities, etc. In other businesses, we have multinational corporations around the world as our customers, but it's all about giving the customer what he or she wants and finding that out. So we are spending an enormous amount of time actually talking to our customers to see how can we serve you better. And that has been really vital in this process of retooling. On the agriculture side, on the domestic side, you know, it's been a lot about advocacy because there is a lot of change. I think people recognize change, and in a world where we're governed by very stringent laws, sometimes even dated laws, despite the willingness of the administration, of politicians to be able to assist you, they are bound by those legal frameworks, okay? And changing them is not very easy, and it requires a consistent and persistent advocacy. So a lot of the schemes that are coming out, a lot of, for example, the incentives that the government of India is bringing out is through that level of advocacy. And that opportunity today is a very real one. And it has to, it's because people are willing to listen, people are willing to change the rules of the game, that we need to really embrace that opportunity today.
Great. Thank you. Arvind, you want to add your thoughts on Act Now, Plan Now? How are your priorities shifting for your company, for your industry?
I think, as I said earlier, or alluded to earlier, in the auto industry, we've had to do Plan Now for a while now. I think ever since Dieselgate, where there was this crisis of confidence on the industry and an acceleration towards electric vehicles. So my company, for example, is 100% IC engine. All our products go into IC engine. So IC engines goes away, we're dead. And I could see this coming 10 years ago. So we invested then itself using our core skill of mechatronics to see how we can expand our product portfolio. And many auto companies, especially after Dieselgate, have taken the same step because they had no choice. And the recent changes in government legislation to BS6 and then now to promotion of EV have only accelerated that. So we have actually been on this journey now in hindsight. At that time, we didn't like it so much, but I think now in hindsight, fortunately, we've been on this journey for 4 or 5 years. And so we have a clear strategy of how to diversify our revenue base and grow. And that's actually been very useful to us. So actually going down into this lockdown, for example, I used April where we had no sales to actually finalize our 3-year strategy. And we had, I never had this kind of time with my management team. And we used this time to actually spend so much time to think through in detail about all the things that we had to do. So I'm quite, as I said before, I'm quite bullish about this whole reset. And I think I fully agree with this Act Now, Plan Now. Because the opportunity, there are so many people who are going to be weak. We have seen around the world, many suppliers are starting to struggle. There are acquisitions to be made, assets to be bought. So those who have the financial power to survive this phase actually have a lot of upside to gain. I also think there's an opportunity here that many Indian companies can look towards. It's a little bit like telecom. You don't need to go 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. If you're a late player, you can actually leapfrog.
Yeah.
So many of the global companies in manufacturing today, in the automotive industry today, are saddled with higher overhead costs, higher admin costs, because their infrastructure and the entire ecosystem is built on IC engine technology meant for a previous era. As it changes towards smaller cars and more nimble vehicles and more fuel efficient vehicles and more EV powertrains, it's resetting the playing field for a lot of players. And so it's one thing is to go against a $50 billion company who has been established like a giant in this industry for 60 years. And the second is when everything gets reset and you have an opportunity to reset. China was trying to grab that opportunity. Now even China is in question mark because people are looking for alternatives. So I can't imagine, at least in my industry, when we would have a relatively equal playing field to show what we can do. So the onus really is on Indian entrepreneurs or Indian companies to see how we can use this opportunity to actually grow. And I think India has come such a long way in quality that we can actually make a claim to make for the world. I don't think that was the case 10, 15 years ago. But I think today the quality standards in India have improved so much that we can actually challenge many of these companies.
Very good. Thank you, Arvind. Thank you, Tarun. One question slightly, that we have seen a lot in the last few months. Many of the companies leverage their existing assets to do something that they had not done in the industrialized way. An example is Mahindra and Mahindra trying to make ventilator and succeeding in a partial way, or Godrej and Boyce trying to make very small component, fasteners that go into ventilator. Many of the other companies, trying and developing material for PPE that goes because we were not independent. And now you see a glut of supply coming up everywhere because everybody thought of that as a discontinuity and they use the existing assets smartly and come up with the solution. And the idea of frugal engineering, frugal innovation is, embraced by all the Indians, very, very smartly. So you'd love to get maybe, Arvind, why don't you start, you rightly said, auto is 50% of all industrial GDP in the country, right? So kind of technology, kind of engineering, kind of skill set that we have in unparalleled, and probably in some subsectors of auto, best in the world, like let's say auto, two-wheeler, right? So love to get your view of how do you use these existing assets to pivot to a new opportunity that is getting created, or do you think will take time?
Again, I can't speak for the industry, I can speak for myself. So taking that exact example, we supplied motors for some of these ventilators, actually, you talked about. We're a motor company, we're a mechatronic company. We provide motors, controllers, sensors, that type of products. And we supplied motors for some of these ventilators. In fact, we do supply to whatever extent that they make. I repurposed my filter line to make masks. Okay, so, but that's just simply an opportunistic thing for a little bit here and there. It doesn't make a difference whether you do it or not. But that attitude of using the core skill set to diversify your product base, we started 8 years ago. Again, that's why I said many auto companies had this advantage. We were forced to do that because we knew the way EVs were going to come eventually in India, you had to change your game. And so making motors for white goods or industrial applications is a journey I started a long time ago. So to me, this is just accelerating that same journey faster. It just says, okay, we have to do what we have to do.
Yeah.
We supply traction motors for e-rickshaws and two-wheelers now. But that's something we started 10 years ago. That's just helping us now. So we're just lucky, frankly, because our industry was reset by force before. But in this journey, we have seen when we have actually benchmarked our products against the best in the world, our guys don't come out so bad. And I think where India does not give itself enough credit is our engineering capability. We speak so much about China and manufacturing and all that. Our engineering capability, good quality engineering capability, I think it's pretty damn good. And an evidence of that is the two-wheeler companies. The main 3 two-wheeler Indian companies have made names for themselves all around the world, whether it's South America, whether it's Africa. And Amit, you work with them, you know what they do. And they've beaten the Chinese back in their own game. The Chinese had a much bigger two-wheeler industry with many more players and a much deeper supply chain 10, 15 years ago. The Indians won on quality. They won because our products were better. And I supply heavily into that industry, so I know the standards that they supply to. That is Indian engineering. So I come back to, it's not the Indian engineering capability. It's not the competency of the country. It is not it's not our ability to meet cost targets. So what is it? It is simply this, from whatever I've seen, it's our ability to take big, bold bets. I think we still come from such a starved mindset of this frugal engineering is coming from that starved mindset. So that's a good sign. But the bad side is also we take smaller bets. We don't take those kinds of bets the Chinese take. And I think that's the game we need to learn to play. So the field is now reset. It's up to us to figure out how much risk we want to take and grab the opportunity. I don't think it's a competency issue anymore.
I was reading the newspaper today and looking at Reliance results and the importance of Jio's contribution to those performance. I think talking about big, bold bets, I think that's one company that has taken huge bets and succeeded and raised enough finance and raised their share price many times or many percentage in the last 90 days than any other company. So absolutely point well taken. Tarun, just building that, I'd love to get your views because we have talked a lot about China Plus One, Engine 2.0. How do you think your industry will get ready to manage through this crisis or recession and come out stronger, or even your company thinking about it?
So let me start by speaking from my own personal experience about my own company. The moment the country went into lockdown, we have large distillery capacities in North India. And I was approached by people in government that, listen, can you establish using open source technology, sanitizer plants? We'll give you the permission overnight. So the speed of this was unbelievable. For an excisable commodity to have decisions taken in 3 hours or 4 hours is never ever been seen before, but it was the need of the hour. We set up a 5,000 liter plant in 7 days. We doubled the expansion 4 days after that, and we've continued to double it several times over since then. And this was not just ourselves or my company, but this was many other people who are in this ecosystem who embraced what the need of the hour was. But it wasn't just about making a product, and it's certainly not about the ingenuity of how to do it quickly and you manufacture it safely and distribute it safely as well. But it's about the last mile delivery service. So I saw many people that are involved on the services side, agri-services side, that actually repurposed tankers, repurposed moving vehicles, etc., to be able to use these large quantums of sanitizer that were being created to clean large areas in rural India and semi-urban India. Now, this is a change in mindset that is happening. Okay, it is a fundamental problem. Over the years, people coming to our country have always witnessed. One of the things that stays is the level of hygiene isn't up to let's say European or North American standards. But these kinds of changes, this adoption at every level, from a village level to a district level, and of course at city levels, is something that has started. It's a journey that has started. From it will come a tremendous amount of innovation. So I know that there is a lot of work that is being done right now on hygiene products. Okay, it's being done by ourselves. It's being done by many other organizations and educational establishments across the country. It gives light to a whole new industry, an entire new ecosystem. And it goes hand in hand with what you were saying, what Arvind was saying, in terms of Indian ingenuity. It may sound all strawberries and cream, but it's not that. I mean, the pain is still there. What if you don't have the money to go out and invest in these ideas? What if your businesses are collapsing? What if you don't have people to operate your businesses and you have fixed overheads that you have to meet? Bank loans. We haven't even addressed that subject as yet. I think NPAs are, when they get reported at the end of this fiscal year, will be somewhere like 14% for the entire country. There are systemic and fundamental problems in our system, but it doesn't mean that there aren't real opportunities and new areas of investments. And I think Indians by nature find innovative ways to fit into these systems. The change that we really need to make, in complete agreement with Arvind, is that our bets need to be bigger. They need to be bolder. Our market doesn't necessarily need to be just domestic, but we need to explore beyond our national confines, okay? And those companies that make that jump will really be the leaders come 2030 and beyond.
Very, very well articulated. Thank you, Tarun. Let me just shift gear in the interest of time. I think talk a bit about the new operating model. The ways of working are going to be very different. And I talked a bit about gig economy and talent pool, but you've seen TCS announcement that, in the next 5 years, they'll move 75% of the workforce. Very easy for a services firm to do. Very difficult for manufacturing firms such as yourself to do. Even my consulting and services organizations, we can move somewhere in between, but we're a client-facing organization. How is the new operating model? Let's assume that vaccine comes in the next 3, 6, 9 months, and we go back to, let's say, a much more conducive environment, less risky environment. But the new operating model, will we go back, or will it be different? Arvind, do you want to start off on that?
Yeah, I don't think for sure it will be different. I mean, it will be go back to normal. It's going to be a completely new normal, and I think my experience has been very positive. I've been very pleasantly surprised at how much we've managed to get done during this time. And our company is not exactly the most, let's say, forward-looking company on technology. And auto industry is a very in-person company. If there is a supply issue, the CEO calls the CEO. And that's how micro things are managed in our industry. But this has been an eye-opening situation for me. We've won business during lockdown. We've had products released. We have sent people to the factory just to do prototyping and come back home. It's been mind-blowing how much we've been able to accomplish during this time. even now that the lockdown is starting to lift in Chennai, and our plants, I think all our plants around India are relatively issue-free and running properly. We have avoided sending indirect people to the plants just to reduce the load on HR and canteen and medical people so that we don't increase risk. And quite frankly, our productivity hasn't suffered. We have established a system to monitor from work from home, and people love it. The level of productivity we have got has been quite good. We're also being much more objective on the work people do, because we've never had the opportunity to see what individuals contribute. When you kind of get together and you kind of all do the same thing, it's very hard to decide who does what. And I think now that we're all separate, I think there's much more incremental value addition by every individual rather than this mass of people that typically show up. It also allows, in many ways, less interference from people. I think in India is a very, still this boss behavior is a bit too much. And I think letting people be and just doing their job, good and bad, I think it's a much more transparent system, and I totally welcome that. So I just don't see us going back to this obsession about meeting, obsession about traveling. We have design reviews. We have had audits in the shop floor with cameras taken on to see the machines, and where people used to fly all the way for this 2-hour audit. I mean, in hindsight, those are all crazy. And so I think in many ways, it will make us much more productive, much more sharply focused. Some of our equipment came from Wuhan. My guys actually went to Wuhan in January, and we had a bit of a panic on the machines that came from there.
Wow.
We got it from there. We installed it. We had the guys from Wuhan through video camera tell us how to program the Chinese machines. It's fine. It's running just fine, making parts. So I think this is definitely a better way of doing things. Our overhead costs have just come down so dramatically. There's nothing I could have done to have brought it down this level. None of us have lost anything.
Yeah.
Life is better this way. So I feel this is the only good thing that has come out of this whole thing. And it's definitely, we did some surveys with our employees. They have been a lot happier. They've had more flexible time with their families. So, I don't have much to complain about. I think this will be a good change for the industry.
Tarun, you want to add from your varied perspective from both your businesses?
Sure. My view is I think people will be scared of transmission long after the lockdowns and this crisis abates. I think there are fundamental changes that will happen not just in India but internationally, and we, as business operators, need to be cognizant of that and embrace it with open hands. Having said that, at a personal level, I found operating from the confines of one's home to be very refreshing. It's been an incredible opportunity to be very focused, devoid of distractions, and really spend much more time. And in the number of people that I've spoken to, number of forums that I've spoken on, I've found exactly the same response, which is tremendously heartwarming and encouraging. What I would like, there's 2 points I'd like to make. I think I was particularly influenced by some of the actions that have been taken. And one example in particular is the Siemens policy. So the incoming CEO, Roland Bush, what he's followed for his company is something that resonates very highly with me. And I'll talk about that in a few seconds. But let me tell you that for the larger part of our business, the agriculture and alcohol sites, these are rural-based businesses. For want of a better word, I would say still operating in semi-feudal systems. So the opportunity for improvement is absolutely enormous. Yes, you're using modern day technologies and you're continuously investing in technological innovation, but the base that you're coming from is really very low. And I want to be perfectly honest about that. And therefore, these changes have come at a speed of light, including on the softer aspect of people that are working and operating in the businesses. The engineering front, the experience is similar to Arvind's. But on this front, it's been, on the agricultural front, it's been a very rewarding experience. So, we've adopted this 2 or 3 days work schedule, and even greater flexibility than that. It may continue post the lockdown as well, because the result has been a happier work-life balance. In the surveys that we've done, in the documented conversations that human resources has done, we found positivity across the board. And the most important thing is, the objective has been to sharpen the company's performance and profile, by offering more flexibility. So the focus has been, rather than on time spent, it has been on outcomes and performance. Conversations have been tighter. Conversations have always been result oriented. And I think that creates a much healthier environment to work in. People are happier working with objectives without having the confines of, do I have to come into the office for 10 hours today? Will I be concerned about transmission? What happens if somebody contracts COVID and did I touch something, etc., etc. Those are things that you don't want to preoccupy yourself with. What you want to do is you want to be occupied with productivity, with efficiency, and the easier way of doing that is to help people work wherever they are most comfortable.
Great.
I'll just add a couple of points to that.
Go ahead, Arvind.
And I don't know why it required COVID to make us do all these things, but we could have done all this before.
Yeah.
I've addressed all my suppliers. We had 600, 700 people, which I could do on WebEx, which I could have done earlier, which I didn't do. I've addressed thousands of employees and their families, which I could have done before, I didn't do. My aftermarket guys have addressed hundreds of mechanics in rural India, in places I'd never heard of, and to check in on them to see how they're doing. And in the process, learned so much about the way the aftermarket works that we never heard of before.
Yeah.
Why didn't we do all this before? I don't know. But many of this will stay, because it has been the touch we have seen to people has been so transformative and so positive. I don't think we'll go back to the old ways. I think this has definitely opened our eyes to a new way of doing things.
Let me add three things to your great refreshing perspective. I'm so glad to hear coming from manufacturing industry. So thank you for sharing. I think I'll tell you three things which are quite interesting that I've seen across some of my clients. So work from home has become such an important part, but it's very difficult to make do work and household activities when you don't have the right leverage, right support at home. So some of our clients actually gone to the extent of making sure that they're setting up the concierge services to take care of a lot of things that they need to do, pick up, drop off, laundry, etc. They even contracted some of the dabbawalas to serve lunches between 12 to 1, so that the employees don't have to worry about making food while they're taking meeting. Big difference. So that's what we are seeing. In fact, in some situations, some of our biggest clients are asking, do we need branches going forward? Like one of the largest bank in the country saying that, hey, do we need to have our branch footprint? We have so many branches, so much of real estate tied to it. Now we don't need those. What's our new operating model? Should we do without them? Now that's very, very fundamental question. And they thought the branch experience was fundamental for customer acquisition and customer retention. But now that's being questioned completely. So that's one which is coming up. As a result, the operating model, like the span of control, hey, do you need to have a span of control of 8 to 10 or 15, depending on the industry? Or can you manage even more? Like, through, tools and, a lot of software that exists, you don't need to micromanage people. So how should you think about productivity? How should you think about that? Real estate footprint, do we need, as I mentioned, in terms of branches? Even employees want to move to second tier cities because the quality of life is so much better. So all those questions are coming, or should we allow or should we not allow? But there is also a downside. I think you talked about separation of work week and weekend, but in many industries that is not happening, and it's affecting the psychological, the mental health of many of the employees. They are not able to manage the challenges that COVID has presented to them. They're working like 15 hours a day, and then there is no boundaries for the weekend. And I think we need to find a way to address that also. So some good news on the operating model side, but there are some challenges that we need to address as well. So I thought I'll share with you. We have already crossed an hour, and in the interest of time, what I'll suggest is we'll take some questions and then hopefully conclude this quickly. I think I'll start with the easiest question. Question is, how many of us are wearing shorts during this. I think at least I raised my hand. At least I'm the one, and Abhay too. So I think at least 2 out of 5. Arvind and Tarun are dapper in their shirt and suit. Ishani, I'm guessing, is as well dressed as she always is. So that's the first.
I'll add to that actually. In our industry, when we first started this, obviously people showed up without knowing they were on video and all that. There was a lot of embarrassing moments came.
Yeah.
So we actually prepared a work from home policy.
Yeah.
And to educate people of what to wear, how to be, and how to conduct, and how to separate that, and how to structure the timing such that, initially it was the same thing. People work crazy, and it was just insane.
Yeah.
And we put some policies, and I think over a period of time, we've managed to find some sanity.
Wonderful. Abhay, do you want to? I think I tried to cover a few questions, but the last few questions, maybe you want to just pose.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to thank all three of you. Very, very insightful discussion and very positive, actually. So both Tarun and Arvind, very, very positive views on and the way you're kind of looking at it and the way you're approaching it. So that was, like Amit said, very refreshing outlook. And I think we can all do with that kind of positivity right now. In terms of questions, and specifically, I think a lot of the questions have been answered through the discussion, Amit, as I can see. There is, the first question was on Government of India's response. And I think even that
has been addressed, partly addressed.
Yeah, Tarun kind of talked about how quickly things moved, how quickly they got the approval for the sanitizer manufacturing plant. So that is an indicator of that. But in terms of, there's one question about the increasing automation and how they see impacting the workforce in their
let's take that question. I think that's the question. How do you balance there's been migrant worker population, issue with many of the manufacturing locations. So maybe, and both of you run pretty highly industrialized companies in the sector. Right. So maybe let's take that as the last question. Or your views about how you thinking about the future of your specific company industry, and similarly, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I have two concerns. I think this is, if you ask me what I'm actually worried about, it's only two things. I think this pandemic has probably made us also realize how little we all need and how much we waste money on so much stuff that we really don't need. But our industry and our whole consumption pattern is driven by a lot of those purchases. So I don't know whether that frugality, once the consumer mindset shrinks, the willingness to spend and the consequential costs that will have on the demand, that is something that bothers me, because then it's a deflationary issue which has a much more dangerous outcome. The second is, I think definitely there's going to be a job issue. I think all this work from home and all that is just is a huge efficiency improvement, but the output is not going to be there. So there is going to be a reduction in jobs. However you spin it, there's going to be a reduction in jobs. And that is not a good situation. And it's going to be a worldwide phenomenon. And how it's going to affect socially and all that, this is probably the only thing I'm actually worried about. And I don't have an answer to it, obviously. It's just it's a scary situation. It's a sad situation. So this bothers me, and I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, agree. Tarun, your views?
Yeah, it is very worrying. Okay, and I'm going to split it up into two perspectives. When you look at and eventually come back to your question on automation, you have to look at it for, say, skilled and unskilled workforce, because both are relevant. I think as far as the skilled part is concerned, for manufacturing, industry, etc., the embracing automation is something that is not new. It was happening in the past. It will continue to happen in the future as well. The speed may be a little elevated, and it will be elevated only because there is a concern of managers that, listen, what happens, because we're not out of the COVID crisis. Let's fully understand, right? What happens if we have a mass outbreak in a facility? You have orders to fulfill. You have financial commitments. There are important things that you have to consider at every step of the way. And so can I substitute any work processes with automation is something that you have to consider. You have to consider it now. As far as substituting the unskilled workforce, that is a huge problem. There's massive scope for mechanization across rural India, massive. But what are those people going to do that actually don't come back to as the farm workforce, for example? Just to give you one example, where do those people go? The Manrega program simply cannot afford more opportunities or more dole outs to people that are not working. We don't have the money to be able to do that. I mean, I'm tying this into the first question also about Government of India policies. The frustration that exists is because the 20 lakh crore scheme, actually the real payout of that is very, very little. It's all tied in many other constituent elements. And there was a level of frustration about that. A lot of people talked about it. But coming back to mechanization, it's vital to be able to adopt it at the rural level and in terms of substituting the semi-skilled or unskilled labor. That is going to offer more challenges to India. It is going to offer more challenges to our political classes as well when we embrace it. But it is something that will happen. I'm fairly certain that it is something that will happen out of necessity.
No, great, Arvind and Tarun, very, very helpful perspective. And I think you're absolutely right. And I want to close on a lighter note. My wife and I have really understood the meaning of vacuum cleaners, and at the expense of a maid, the job losses for somebody, and less work for us using the vacuum cleaner. And Dyson is the brand to buy, at least that I. So on a lighter note, I just want to summarize what you just said. But thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure hosting you and reconnecting you for this topic. And thank you, Abhay, for making it happen, and Ishani to the team. And thank you for the audience for joining us. Why don't we do one small thing, Abhay? We should send a small, there are a lot of questions we didn't answer. They were very specific questions. Maybe we'll share our email. Maybe the audience can send to us, and we should do a quick feedback or online feedback, and they can send that to us. So hopefully we'll be able to close the loop on some of the things that didn't need to be addressed as a collective forum.
Okay, sure. We could try that. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Okay,
Wonderful.
yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. This has been
Thank you all.
Wonderful.
Thanks, guys. Good to catch up.
Bye. Pleasure. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.